Big breaking news in the world of football. Manchester United did not fire anyone today, at least according to my knowledge. I cannot confirm or deny any unofficial firings, but I have not been able to uncover one person that works at Manchester United that was actually relieved of their duties today. It didn't happen. No, instead, they've decided to spend like $1 trillion. This is why they were firing all those lunch ladies. You ready? So they announced that they were going to build a new stadium. Except they didn't announce that they were going to build a new stadium. They released what is essentially a proposal. So I'm going to try and look up the actual Manchester United statement here. ManchesterUnited.com maybe, because they have all of the full images and like a good idea of what's being talked about here. And yeah, I'm going to be honest, I don't think I've ever been on ManchesterUnited.com before. So what am I looking for? Oh yeah, there you go. United confirms ambition to build new stadium. So this is like the announcement of the intention. This is, if confirming that you are actually starting, like breaking ground on a new stadium is getting married, this is asking the stadium on a first date. You're laying the groundwork. You're taking that initial leap. Now, what is the point of this? Well, I believe it's like a precursor to asking for money from the government, but we'll get to why, right? Because Manchester United does not have the money to do this. That is the very important thing to remember. I know Sir Jim Ratcliffe is worth a lot of money, and I know that the Glazers are worth a lot of money if they sell Manchester United. But as we have discovered with Everton getting into all sorts of FFP problems because of Bramley Moore Dock, amongst other things, if you are going to pay for and build a new stadium, you're going to have to balance that against FFP somehow. That is an expense of the club. Right. And I don't believe, based off the way that Manchester United has been talking about its finances, that this Manchester United team is able to float the money to be able to build a stadium like this. Instead, and this is like obviously in the official Manchester United site, instead what the focus is on is all the benefits that it would bring the community. And I have a lot of warnings that I need to pass on from my American sports knowledge. But before we get into any of that, we need to look at the stadium. Now, I don't know whose idea it was to orient the stadium around 3 different toothpicks that are essentially 5,000 feet high, right? It looks like they've done something like the needle in Seattle, right? I think it's called. And you can go up above the Space Needle. You go up above the entire city. That's basically what they're going to try and do with this stadium. I also love how they've turned the entire city of Manchester and the area of Old Trafford, like around the Trafford area, into a green paradise that looks like some futuristic alien civilization. But the actual idea, as much as I love making fun of the appearance of it and the obvious over-optimism that's going on here, is pretty cool. If we're breaking down what the stadium proposal is, this whole big net thing is actually going to create this kind of covered walkway that's outside of the stadium. It's open air, which is very neat, instead of dealing with like a totally closed area around the stadium. You have this open air quasi kind of mall area where you guess you'd have restaurants and a museum here, right? And we've got some wonderful kind of AI slop feeling images going on. But you get the idea that there is this open air ring around the stadium with different things going on, kind of a Manchester United village. And I'll be honest, the best stadiums in the United States, the best stadiums I've ever been to, have this village around it. Now, typically it's not this planned, right? But you have in Chicago, you have Wrigleyville, right? In Boston, you've got this set of bars and restaurants around the stadium that are all kind of right on top of it, and that's where you go before and after the game. And that's where, if you want to go watch a game when they're playing somewhere else, if you want to go celebrate a big win after the game, that's where you can kind of go. And it looks like to me that's what they're trying to create in this outer circle. And I think that is a good idea. But it's very important to remember that it is so much of an idea that we're light years away from this actually ever for them actually starting to build it. But back to my word of warning that I've learned from my time as just an American sports fan is they start this statement by basically they're getting on their knees for the government here, right? They are begging. They're begging. This is a PR attack on the government. Manchester United has thrown its support behind the government's growth agenda by announcing its intention to pursue a new 100,000-seater stadium as the centerpiece of the regeneration of the Old Trafford area. So keywords in here, pursue. I don't really know what that means. I don't think anybody else does either. They're going to pursue the idea of this stadium. I am 100,000 seats is what a lot of people have focused on. I think that's totally doable. Manchester United is arguably got the biggest brand exposure of any team in the world with the way they dominated the 90s, the early 2000s, right? They are a team that is, arguably the most recognizable team badge in the world. They're going to be able to fill a 100,000 seat stadium. It's obviously not going to have the same sort of atmosphere as your old 25,000 seater where it's a bunch of diehards, but if you're a club like Manchester United, you'd rather sell 100,000 tickets and have most of them be tourists that are willing to pay more. Let's be honest. And that's going to make them more money, and then you're just hoping that you're able to have your collection of intense fans. And at least the way they want to build the stadium makes it look like, in this random rendering that we have here, that it's kind of on top of the field. And this could, if it's built the way that it looks, be a complete cauldron of noise. It also looks like it's going to be kind of domed, which is going to deprive us, obviously, of the Manchester weather affecting the way that these matches are played. Game's gone. But yeah, this is how they start their statement, is we throwing the support behind the government's growth agenda. The government apparently announcing some sort of infrastructural improvement agenda. The stadium and wider regeneration project have the potential to deliver an additional £7.3 billion per year to the UK economy, which brings large-scale social and economic benefits to the community and wider region, including the possible creation of 92,000 new jobs, more than 17,000 new homes, as well as an additional 1.8 million visitors annually. Look, that's a boatload of jobs, and I am fully aware that this paragraph is this is rounding up, right? If you're saying that the stadium project is going to deliver 7.3 billion pounds per year to the UK economy, you are adding in like every possible angle of what this stadium would create, and probably not calculating all of the things that maybe you take away with the construction time of this stadium or the true cost of building the stadium or whatever, right? It's a sales pitch. That's what this feels like, is a sales pitch. I won't pretend to understand how they came about these numbers. They're not exactly showing their math, and people never do, right? And it's not their fault that they don't, right? You're trying to write a slick statement. You're not going to include like, here are all the factors we use to calculate that this is 7.3 billion pounds per year for the UK economy. But if you're going off these two paragraphs, they are going to ask the government for money to build this stadium. They are trying to get a national stadium built in the north of England. And Sir Jim Ratcliffe has made it clear before that he wants to ask the government to help fund a stadium. And if you know that, and you know that under FFP, you're going to have to pay for a stadium, this is how you want to start it, because you want to ask the government for money. Don't do it, England. Do not do it. A solution is to exclude stadium renovations from FFP, because then all these billionaires that have a ton of money would be able to spend that ton of money without it affecting their ability to run their clubs. And then you would have better stadium infrastructure. What you don't want is a situation that, a club like Manchester United seems like it is in, where you have to choose between investing in the team or investing in the stadium, right? If you are willing to take a big bite and take a huge swing at building a stadium, great. But the reason that is something that I would be okay with allowing outside of FFP is if you don't allow it outside of FFP, you're going to end up with more of this. You're going to end up with debates between teams and the government to build stadiums. This is what happens in the United States, and it is ugly. You want to know why teams move? Because that is the ultimate threat you can levy when it comes to a new stadium. The Oakland Raiders moved to Las Vegas because Vegas promised to build them a nice, big, shiny stadium, and Oakland didn't. That is how the team moved. Like, if you're thinking the worst case scenario, you're thinking Manchester United not playing in the Old Trafford area. That is how you end up here. You can end up in that reality. I'm serious. Club ownership structure is very similar in a lot of leagues around the world compared to the United States. Germany obviously is different with the 50+1 share, but in the United States, you own the team. And in England, you own the team. The Glazers and Sir Jim Ratcliffe own Manchester United. Right? There are different legal things in place, like the Premier League, that can try and check them on what they want to do. Same in the US with the NFL. But let's be honest, they're really just interested in money. And if they can show that more money is going to be made by doing this over that, they're probably going to let them do it. Right? The only thing, in my estimation, that has kept teams from moving around, that has kept teams from leveraging their influence over an area in order to get stadiums built, is nobody's done it before. Nobody's been the canary in the coal mine to see how it would work. And the governments don't pay to build these stadiums. They don't. In the United States, you have different states and different, municipal governments that can throw the money behind it. But in the UK, you have that national government. And if teams are able to start going to that national government and saying, hey, this is going to provide a huge amount of economic revitalization to this area, and it might. And then the government decides to invest in this infrastructure project. Well, now the government is all of a sudden investing in a project for Manchester United. If we have FFP the way that it is right now, that is also just grossly competitively unfair. But that's totally what they're setting up for with this. I think a lot of people overlooked it to look at the funny-looking stadium. But to be honest, as much as I called it 3 toothpicks, it's not a terrible, it's a very iconic, unique look. Right, and that it creates that area around the stadium, which is cool. 100,000 seater would obviously be awesome. Right, and Manchester United has to do this. They can't keep playing in their stadium. Old Trafford is so unbelievably messed up. And either you try and rip Old Trafford down to the studs and rebuild the whole thing and play in somebody else's stadium for 4 or 5 years, or you build this stadium next door and turn Old Trafford into a park to memorialize all of the great teams of old. That's what the Yankees did. And that honestly kind of worked because they didn't want to play in the Mets stadium for 5 years. So they built an entire new stadium in the parking lot of the old one. And then they tore down old Yankee Stadium and turned it into a park that you could play baseball on and hit the ball at the same place Babe Ruth did. Leave the penalty spots and boxes in place in a park. And allow people to take penalties or whatever, where Wayne Rooney did, right? Like that's cool. You can do that, and I don't, obviously part of it, me being American and having experience with that, and living in New York and seeing the way the Yankees did it, it makes sense to me why you would have to do that. They can't just continue to play in Old Trafford and fix all the problems with Old Trafford. That reality does not exist. The scary thing about it is where the money is going to come from. Because I think the money might come from somewhere else, and that's just it's going to create a whole new group of problems that, at least in my understanding, don't exist in the UK right now. But they would start to exist if all the other owners saw Manchester United get a ton of government help to build their stadium.